Do these three points here today to get yourself into the best shape of your life. Naturally, when you think about doing things, you're going to instantly think about doing from an external standpoint, right? And that is instantly where you go wrong when it comes to getting yourself into the best shape of your life. So today we're going to remove the external, because when we can remove the external and tidy up the internal, you literally set yourself up for an easier external standpoint, aka doing the things you need to be doing, but it becomes far more consistent. The result is sped up because you've tidied the internal. So these three steps are going to do exactly that, so you can get yourself into the best shape of your life and stay there.
Point number one, does your environment actually align towards your goals? As you can see, I'm standing in the kitchen here, right? Now, everything in your kitchen is actually going to matter. Before you now think about eating healthier, tracking your calories, following a meal plan, doing whatever you need to do in terms of steps, in terms of training, right? You actually want to think internal, what's actually in, right? In your own house, in your own environment, because if the environment is off, it's going to make it so much harder to follow things when it comes to actually sticking towards your nutritional targets. Now, it's so easy to go off track with nutrition, down to stress, down to tiredness, down to just life throwing its challenges, right? And it's very easy to now go and pick at things, which is why you want to make sure your cupboards, your fridges are actually aligned towards your goals, right? Meaning that your environment is actually set up for success. So you can now go and live in your environment with complete freedom. And what I mean by that is you haven't actually got any triggers in front of you causing you to be super consistent, because when you're consistent, you build momentum. When you build momentum, you're going to see a hell of a lot of results, right? But it doesn't come easy. It doesn't come very fast to you if you are in an environment where there's crisps, there's chocolates, there's things that when you're tired, when you're anxious, when you're fatigued, when you're stressed, becomes a default behavior. It could be chocolate, it could be crisps, it could be croissants, it could be any sort of bakery, it could be anything, right? Even alcohol, right? So you need to make sure that your environment is absolutely aligned to how you want it. So you might even be sat there right now and be like, well, that's all good and well, but I have children, Ben. Well, do you know what? I've got you covered on that as well. Because look at this box of Galaxy here. I love chocolate, right? But I'm not going to go into a chocolate bar every single night because I know it's not going to do me favors in terms of how I want to look and how I want to feel. So what you can really do is break up your chocolate, weigh it out so you know exactly what calories and how much grammage is in there. So therefore, you can even break this down further. You can then put Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday on it. So therefore, you know if you want a bit of chocolate, you can dip into the chocolate because you know the exact calories and the exact grammage, meaning you're not going off track or falling off plan, which again, if you can't incorporate this sort of stuff, then you're actually not living in alignment with how you want to feel, how you want to look, and how you want to live. Because that means you're not actually going to be able to stick to this long term because it's not a lifestyle. So making sure you've got things in your cupboards, if you have children, the chocolates, the crisps, making sure it's really accessible for them, obviously, because if they want it, absolutely fine, right? And if you want it, again, absolutely fine. But make it super, super easy for yourself and make it super easy through the journey by understanding the amount that you can consume on a daily basis, a weekly basis, a monthly basis, the calories that you can allocate to it, and label the hell out of it, because when you can do that, you're always going to win the game. So just a thought for you, just off the back of that there in terms of environment, are you actually making it really hard for yourself by not setting things up like this in terms of treats, setting your cupboards up to success, setting your fridge up to success? Because it all starts within before it goes outwards, right? Because results are always based on behavior. Behaviors have to happen first and continuously have to happen and build consistency over time, and then you get a result back. It's like you put a certain amount of coins into a penny slot machine, right? And then you might get a toy out, but you have to put a certain amount in, and you don't know how many that is, but you know if you keep on doing it, you're always going to get the result you want. Which means when it comes to food in your environment and alcohol in your environment, any sort of liquids, right? You need to know if they're actually aligned to you, and also you need to know, are you actually allocating some of your favorite stuff across your week and into your week? You need to know exactly the data on that. Otherwise, if you've got no data to go off of and you're trying to wing it, the actual implementation of what you're trying to do is going to be sloppy. There's not going to be much intent behind it, which means your results are actually going to take a lot longer than they need to be taken. Point number 2 is know your calendar. Know exactly what's coming up within your month, right? Within your days and within your weeks. Because if you don't understand what's coming up within your months, within your weeks and within your days, it's going to make it really hard for you to navigate nutrition. And if you want a bit more flexibility with your nutrition, so having, the takeaway, going out for the meal out, making sure, you can have a few alcoholic drinks here and there right across like a 30-day period. If you don't know what's coming up within your weeks and within your month, then it's going to be really hard for you to actually manage your nutrition because you don't know where you need to be allocating calories. You don't know where you're going to be need to be pulling back on calories as well. Which means essentially all you're now doing is not going into the month with any intent. You're actually just winging it because you don't know really what's going on. So you're just a bit all over the shop and just praying that it actually comes off the goals that you've got, right? And the reality is, when you have more of a focus and more of an understanding of what's coming up within that month, and I've said this time and time again, is that every single person knows roughly what you've got coming up across like a 30-day period. If you can understand what that is, you can actually allocate as well an understanding of how your energy is going to be week to week, what demands you've got on your plate professionally as well. So therefore you can understand where low weeks might be and where high weeks might be in terms of energy, meaning you can then match that up with intensity of training, actual daily movement, actually allocating specific calories for specific days. So you're now not just looking at training nutrition as training and nutrition to help you get into best shape. You're now actually looking at it from a lifestyle aspect of how to actually live a far greater life with more energy, a better body and more confidence, leaving you in charge of how you look and how you feel year round. This is the important thing, is because when you can understand this and you can allocate certain amount of food, calories, macronutrients across given days and across given weeks, you can then understand where progression is going to be, where the tougher patches are going to be, which then again allows you to align expectation, because you then have the minimum and the maximum standards in place that allow you to operate within, because it provides consistency. You're not overwhelmed. You understand what's coming up. You know when the tough patches are. You know when the easy patches are. So you know exactly where to have your minimum, where to have your maximum standards, leaving you to be super, super consistent, meaning you don't miss a spot. And this is something we do inside Become the Unstoppable, is every single client knows exactly what's going on within their month, within their weeks, which means they're either on the accelerator with pushing standards really hard, or they actually understand, it's going to be a little bit of a tougher week, a little bit busier week, and expectations are a little bit lower, but standards also still going to be hit, but from a minimum aspect, meaning there is still gradual progress across each week. So you're always going to win each week, no matter what life is throwing at you. And that's the most important thing, especially if you lead a busy life, that if you're not doing this, you're basically just voting to make your journey so much harder, because you're now just winging it. So that's point number 2, making sure you know exactly what your calendar is showing and what it requires in order to see the results you want by the end of that month.
Point number 3, the trade-off effect. Now, this is where majority go wrong, because they don't actually understand what is required to get to their goals. And depending on where you want to get to, depends on what needs to be done, because not every goal has the same requirement. For instance, if you want to go from 25% body fat down to 20% body fat, then you can most probably be a little bit more flexible when it comes to the things you're going to be consuming on a day-to-day basis. And when you are going to be going out on the weekends, there may be less structure needed, because you've got that little bit more leeway, because that 5% is not so drastic compared to someone that wants to go from 25% down to 10% body fat. Now that is a completely different ball game. That is going to have completely different requirements in terms of behaviors. Ensure you are incredibly clear on what the actual trade-off effect is for where you want to go, because when it comes to this, and what I see so often when it comes to this is people will actually want to get themselves into the best shape of life, drop 10 kg, drop 20 kg, drop X amount of percent of body fat, right? But they don't actually truly know what is required to get there. They just think, yep, calorie deficit, yep, meal plan, yeah, do you know what, go and train, do X amount of steps. Yes, that's not wrong, right? That is correct. But going from level to level has a completely different requirement in terms of the structure you need to have, the discipline you now need to have, whether you actually need less flexibility or you can actually allow for more flexibility. It is all dependent on what type of goal that you've got in place in terms of dropping body fat, in terms of what your actual long-term goals are. So therefore, you need to get really clear on what the actual trade-off effect is. And that right there is going to lay a really strong foundation that is going to, one, allow you to accelerate your results, two, have a clear expectation of what is really required, which then three, is going to allow you to be far more consistent with what needs to be done on a daily, weekly, monthly basis.